Welcome to It's Past Your Bedtime, your channel for historically themed bedtime stories. Tonight, we'll dive into the fascinating tale of America's first president. So, get cozy, close your eyes, and let the stories of the past lull you to sleep.
Chapter 1. Humble Beginnings. Colonial Virginia in 1732 was a land of sprawling plantations and dense forests, where the rhythm of life was dictated by the changing seasons and the flow of the rivers. Nestled in this landscape was the Washington family's modest plantation, a humble yet bustling estate that spoke of hard work and perseverance. The Washington family lived in a two-story wooden house, its weather-beaten exterior a testament to years of enduring the elements. Inside, the walls were adorned with simple furnishings, the scent of fresh bread often mingling with the earthy aroma of the nearby fields. Augustine Washington, a man of stern countenance and firm principles, managed the plantation with the help of his sons and a small number of enslaved workers. Mary Ball Washington, Augustine's second wife and George's mother, was a woman of quiet strength, her days filled with tending to the household and raising her children. Young George Washington was born into this world on February 22, 1732. As a child, he was both curious and diligent, traits that were nurtured by his surroundings. He spent his early years exploring the plantation's vast fields and forests, developing a deep connection with the land that would shape his future endeavors. George's early education was sporadic, conducted by local tutors who imparted basic reading, writing, and arithmetic skills. Despite the limited resources, George displayed a keen intellect and an insatiable thirst for knowledge. His most significant influence during these formative years came from his older half-brother, Lawrence Washington. Lawrence had inherited the family estate of Mount Vernon and had served in the British Navy, experiences that imbued him with a worldliness and a sense of duty that George deeply admired. Lawrence took a special interest in George, recognizing his younger brother's potential. He shared stories of his adventures and taught George about the virtues of honor and leadership. Under Lawrence's guidance, George was introduced to the art of surveying, a skill that would soon become a cornerstone of his early career. The precision and discipline required in surveying appealed to George's meticulous nature, and he quickly became proficient in mapping the vast and uncharted lands of Virginia. At the age of 16, George embarked on his first expedition as a surveyor, an experience that would profoundly shape his character. He joined a team led by Lord Fairfax, a wealthy landowner who owned vast tracts of land in the Shenandoah Valley. The journey was arduous, fraught with the challenges of navigating through dense forests, crossing turbulent rivers, and enduring the harsh elements. George's experiences in the wilderness were both enlightening and humbling. He encountered Native American tribes, whose knowledge of the land far surpassed that of the colonists. These interactions sparked a lifelong respect for the indigenous peoples and their cultures. The raw beauty of the frontier, with its towering trees and untamed landscapes, left an indelible impression on George, fostering a spirit of adventure and a deep appreciation for the natural world. As he honed his surveying skills, George also learned valuable lessons in leadership and resilience. He discovered the importance of meticulous planning, the value of hard work, and the necessity of perseverance in the face of adversity. These early expeditions were not only a test of his physical endurance, but also a crucible in which his character was forged. By the time George returned to the plantation, he had matured beyond his years. He was no longer just a boy from a modest plantation, but a young man with a clear sense of purpose and a burgeoning reputation as a skilled surveyor. The wilderness had taught him much about himself and the world around him, lessons that would serve him well in the years to come. Back at the Washington plantation, life continued its steady rhythm. The fields were plowed and planted, the seasons turned, and the family persevered through the challenges of colonial life. Yet within young George there burned a quiet ambition, a desire to explore and understand the vast world beyond the familiar boundaries of home. This ambition, nurtured by his early experiences and the influence of his beloved brother Lawrence, set George Washington on a path that would eventually lead him to the forefront of a nascent nation. Chapter 2. The French and Indian War. George Washington's early military career began as a young man eager to make his mark. By 1752, at the age of 20, he was appointed as a major in the Virginia militia. The colonies were on the brink of conflict with French forces, who were extending their influence into the Ohio Valley, a region both Britain and France claimed. The tension between the two powers was palpable, and George Washington found himself at the heart of this brewing conflict. In 1754, Washington was tasked with a crucial mission to deliver a message to the French, demanding they vacate the Ohio Valley. The journey was grueling, through rugged terrain and harsh winter conditions. Upon arrival at Fort Le Boeuf, the French commander politely but firmly refused to leave. Washington's report of this encounter, filled with detailed observations and maps, impressed his superiors and established his reputation as a diligent and capable officer. Determined to secure British interests in the region, Governor Robert Dinwiddie sent Washington back to the Ohio Valley with a small force to construct a fort at the strategic confluence of the Allegheny and Monongahela rivers. However, the French had already built Fort Duquesne at the site. Washington retreated to a position known as the Great Meadows, where he hastily erected Fort Necessity. The ensuing conflict, known as the Jumonville Incident, occurred in May 1754. Washington's troops ambushed a French scouting party led by Ensign Joseph Coulon de Jumonville. The skirmish resulted in the death of Jumonville, an event that sparked outrage and escalated into full-scale war. French forces retaliated, and on July 3, 1754, they attacked Fort Necessity. Outnumbered and ill-prepared, Washington was forced to surrender. This defeat was a harsh lesson in the realities of military command and the complexities of colonial warfare. Undeterred, Washington's courage and resilience caught the attention of British General Edward Braddock, who arrived in Virginia in 1755 to lead an expedition against Fort Duquesne. Washington joined Braddock's staff as an aide-de-camp, eager to learn from the seasoned British officers. The expedition was a daunting endeavor, moving slowly through dense forests and over rugged terrain. Washington's role was pivotal as he managed logistics, scouted ahead, and maintained communication lines. On July 9, 1755, Braddock's forces were ambushed by a coalition of French soldiers and their Native American allies near the Monongahela River. The battle was chaotic and brutal. Washington's leadership shone through as he rallied the troops, delivering crucial orders amid the chaos. Despite his efforts, the British suffered a devastating defeat, and Braddock was mortally wounded. Washington narrowly escaped with his life, his coat pierced by bullets and his horse shot out from under him. This baptism by fire taught him invaluable lessons in leadership, the importance of adaptability, and the harsh realities of frontier warfare. Returning to Virginia, Washington's reputation was bolstered by his bravery in the face of overwhelming odds. He was promoted to colonel and given command of the Virginia Regiment, tasked with defending the frontier against French incursions and Native American raids. Over the next few years, Washington faced numerous challenges, from maintaining discipline among his troops to navigating the volatile political landscape of the colonies. In 1758, Washington participated in the successful capture of Fort Duquesne, marking a turning point in the war. With the fort in British hands, the French threat in the Ohio Valley diminished. Washington's military career, marked by both setbacks and triumphs, had firmly established him as a respected leader. Amidst the tumult of war, Washington's personal life took a significant turn. In January 1759, he married Martha Custis, a wealthy widow with 2 young children. Their marriage brought stability and prosperity, allowing Washington to focus on his plantation, Mount Vernon, and his growing influence in Virginia society. Martha's presence provided him with a supportive partner, and their home became a center of social and political activity. The French and Indian War had transformed George Washington from a young, inexperienced officer into a seasoned leader. The lessons learned on the battlefield, the alliances forged, and the reputation earned during this tumultuous period would shape his future endeavors. As he returned to Virginia, his thoughts undoubtedly turned to the future, one that held the promise of peace and the pursuit of prosperity, yet also the lurking shadows of new conflicts on the horizon. Chapter 3. The Road to Revolution. By the early 1760s, the relationship between the American colonies and Britain had begun to fray. The French and Indian War left Britain with a massive debt, prompting Parliament to impose a series of taxes and regulations on the colonies to recoup expenses. Measures like the Stamp Act of 1765 and the Townshend Acts of 1767 were met with increasing resentment and resistance among the colonists. George Washington, now a prominent landowner and respected member of Virginia society, found himself drawn into the growing tide of discontent. As a member of the Virginia House of Burgesses, he witnessed firsthand the escalating tensions. The House of Burgesses was the first elected assembly in the colonies, and it served as a forum for expressing colonial grievances. Washington's presence in this body marked his entry into the broader political struggles of the time. In response to the Stamp Act, which imposed a direct tax on printed materials, the Burgesses adopted the Virginia Resolves, denouncing the act as unconstitutional. Washington supported these resolutions, believing that taxation without representation was an infringement on colonial rights. The repeal of the Stamp Act in 1766 was a temporary relief, but subsequent taxes and restrictions continued to fuel anger. Washington's involvement in the colonial resistance grew as tensions mounted. He corresponded with fellow patriots, expressing his concerns about British policies and advocating for a unified response. His plantation, Mount Vernon, became a hub of political discussion, where he hosted meetings with other prominent Virginians to deliberate on the path forward. In 1774, the Intolerable Acts, punitive measures imposed by Britain in response to the Boston Tea Party, galvanized colonial resistance. The colonies convened the First Continental Congress in Philadelphia to coordinate their response. Washington was among the Virginia delegates alongside other future revolutionaries like Patrick Henry and Richard Henry Lee. The Congress sought to present a united front, demanding the repeal of the Intolerable Acts and asserting colonial rights. During the Congress, Washington's demeanor and thoughtful contributions earned him respect. Though not a fiery orator, his calm and resolute presence conveyed a deep commitment to the cause. The Congress concluded with a decision to impose an economic boycott on British goods and to prepare for possible military action. As tensions escalated, Washington's military experience from the French and Indian War proved invaluable. In April 1775, the battles of Lexington and Concord marked the beginning of open conflict between colonial militias and British forces. The Second Continental Congress convened in May, and the need for a unified military command became evident. On June 15, 1775, Washington was appointed as Commander-in-Chief of the Continental Army. His selection was strategic, as he was a Virginian, and the Congress hoped his leadership would help unify the northern and southern colonies. Washington accepted the commission with a mixture of humility and determination, aware of the immense challenges ahead. Washington traveled to Cambridge, Massachusetts to assume command of the ragtag assembly of militias besieging Boston. His arrival was met with a mix of hope and skepticism. The troops were poorly trained, ill-equipped, and lacked cohesion. Washington immediately set to work imposing discipline, organizing the forces, and securing supplies. Under Washington's leadership, the Continental Army faced its first major test during the siege of Boston. The fortification of Dorchester Heights with captured artillery forced the British to evacuate the city in March 1776, a significant early victory that bolstered colonial morale. As the Revolution progressed, Washington's leadership was characterized by his strategic acumen, unwavering resolve, and ability to inspire loyalty among his troops. He faced numerous challenges, including harsh winters, supply shortages, and internal dissent. Yet, his presence provided a steadying influence, and his reputation grew as a symbol of the colonial struggle for independence. Washington's journey from a young surveyor and planter to the commander-in-chief of the Continental Army was marked by a deepening commitment to the principles of liberty and self-governance. The road to revolution was fraught with peril, but Washington's steadfast leadership would prove crucial in the fight for American independence. Chapter 4. Leading the Continental Army. Assuming command of the Continental Army in the summer of 1775, George Washington faced the monumental task of transforming an assortment of militia units into a cohesive fighting force. The challenges were immense. The soldiers were poorly trained, inadequately armed, and undisciplined. Supplies were scarce, and morale was often low. Yet Washington's resolve was unshakable. He understood that the fight for independence hinged on building an effective army capable of confronting the well-equipped British forces. Washington's first significant engagement as commander-in-chief was the siege of Boston. The Continental Army, encamped around the city, sought to expel the British troops entrenched within. The turning point came in March 1776 when Washington orchestrated the fortification of Dorchester Heights, a strategic position overlooking Boston. Using cannons captured from Fort Ticonderoga, Washington's forces fortified the heights overnight. The sight of these artillery positions compelled the British to evacuate the city, marking an early and morale-boosting victory for the Continental Army. The victory at Boston was followed by a series of challenges. The British regrouped and set their sights on New York City, a vital port and strategic location. Washington anticipated the British move and relocated his forces to defend the city. The subsequent Battle of Long Island in August 1776 was a sobering defeat for the Continental Army. The British, led by General William Howe, executed a flanking maneuver that outmatched Washington's defenses, forcing the Americans to retreat. Despite the loss, Washington's leadership during the retreat, including a daring nighttime withdrawal across the East River, preserved the core of the army and prevented a total rout. The defeats in New York were followed by a series of retreats through New Jersey, culminating in a low point for the Continental Army. As winter approached, Washington needed a bold move to revive the cause. On the night of December 25, 1776, he led his troops across the ice-choked Delaware River in a surprise attack on the Hessian garrison at Trenton. The operation was perilous, marked by freezing temperatures and treacherous conditions, yet the attack succeeded brilliantly. The Hessians, caught off guard, were swiftly defeated, and the victory at Trenton reinvigorated the revolutionary spirit. The subsequent winter of 1777 to 1778 at Valley Forge tested the Army's endurance and Washington's leadership to the utmost. Encamped in Pennsylvania, the Continental Army faced severe shortages of food, clothing, and shelter. Disease and exposure claimed many lives. Despite these hardships, Valley Forge became a crucible of transformation. Under the rigorous training regimen of Baron Friedrich von Steuben, a Prussian military officer, the troops emerged as a more disciplined and effective fighting force. Washington's steadfast presence and his efforts to secure supplies and support were crucial in sustaining the army through this dire period. The tide of the war began to turn with the American victory at the Battle of Saratoga in October 1777. General Horatio Gates, with significant contributions from Benedict Arnold, led American forces to a decisive victory over the British. This triumph had far-reaching consequences, most notably convincing France to enter the war as an ally to the American cause. The French alliance brought much-needed military and financial support, shifting the balance of power. Washington's leadership during these years was marked by strategic foresight and an ability to inspire resilience among his troops. The alliance with France culminated in combined operations that would prove decisive in the later stages of the war. Washington's journey from the setbacks in New York to the triumph at Trenton and the endurance of Valley Forge exemplified his ability to lead through adversity. As the war progressed, the Continental Army, now bolstered by French aid and better training, was better positioned to challenge British supremacy. Washington's leadership, characterized by his strategic ingenuity and unwavering commitment to the cause of independence, continued to steer the army through the hardships of war, laying the groundwork for the eventual victory that would secure American independence. Chapter 5. The War's End and Washington's Resignation. As the Revolutionary War entered its final phases, the conflict shifted to the southern colonies, where British forces under the command of General Charles Cornwallis sought to capitalize on Loyalist support. The southern campaigns, however, were marked by a series of brutal and exhausting battles that tested the resolve of both the Continental Army and the American populace. In 1781, a turning point came with the Siege of Yorktown. Cornwallis, after a series of engagements throughout the Carolinas and Virginia, established a fortified position at Yorktown, Virginia. Washington, recognizing the opportunity to deliver a decisive blow, coordinated a joint operation with French forces. The French fleet, under Admiral de Grasse, secured control of the Chesapeake Bay, preventing British naval reinforcements. Meanwhile, Washington marched his troops south from New York, linking up with French forces led by General Rochambeau. The siege began in September 1781 and involved a relentless bombardment of British defenses. Over several weeks, the combined American and French forces tightened their stranglehold on Yorktown, systematically capturing key positions. On October 19, 1781, Cornwallis, recognizing the futility of further resistance, surrendered. The victory at Yorktown effectively sealed the fate of British efforts to quell the revolution, marking a pivotal moment in the struggle for American independence. With the military conflict nearing its end, attention turned to the diplomatic front. Negotiations for peace were complex and protracted, involving representatives from the United States, Britain, France, and Spain. The Treaty of Paris, signed on September 3, 1783, formally ended the war. The treaty recognized the independence of the United States and established its borders from the Atlantic Ocean to the Mississippi River, and from Canada to Florida. With the war officially over, Washington faced one of his most significant acts of leadership. On December 23, 1783, he appeared before the Continental Congress, then meeting in Annapolis, Maryland, to resign his commission as Commander-in-Chief. His resignation was a profound gesture, demonstrating his commitment to the principles of republicanism and the civilian control of the military. In a dignified and emotional ceremony, Washington addressed the Congress, expressing his gratitude for their support and his hopes for the future of the nation. He then formally handed over his commission, returning his sword to civilian authority. Following his resignation, Washington returned to Mount Vernon, his beloved plantation on the banks of the Potomac River. The years of war had taken their toll, and he longed for the peace and tranquility of private life. At Mount Vernon, Washington dedicated himself to agricultural pursuits, overseeing the expansion and improvement of his estate. His time was spent managing the plantation, corresponding with friends and former colleagues, and engaging in local affairs. Despite his return to private life, Washington remained a figure of immense national significance. He was frequently consulted on matters of state and governance, his opinions carrying great weight. Washington's reflections on leadership and duty were shaped by his experiences during the war. He believed deeply in the importance of unity, the necessity of a strong yet restrained central government, and the enduring value of personal integrity and sacrifice. Washington's leadership during the Revolution set a precedent for future American leaders. His ability to inspire, his strategic acumen, and his unwavering commitment to the cause of independence were central to the American victory. His resignation and return to private life reinforced the principles of democratic governance and civilian authority, establishing a legacy of leadership that transcended the military achievements of his career. As he walked the fields of Mount Vernon, Washington reflected on the tumultuous journey that had brought the nation to independence. The lessons of war, the hardships endured, and the triumphs achieved were woven into the fabric of his character. In the quiet moments of his later years, George Washington remained ever mindful of the enduring duty to his country, a duty that would call upon him once more in the not-too-distant future, as the young nation faced new challenges on its path to stability and prosperity. Chapter 6. The Constitutional Convention. In the years following the American Revolution, the fledgling United States struggled under the Articles of Confederation, a framework of government that proved to be weak and ineffective. The Articles provided for a loose confederation of states with a limited central government which lacked the authority to levy taxes, regulate commerce, or enforce laws. This lack of centralized power led to economic turmoil, interstate conflicts, and a general sense of instability. By 1786, it was evident that the Articles of Confederation were inadequate for governing the new nation. Shays' Rebellion, an armed uprising in Massachusetts by discontented farmers protesting economic injustices, underscored the urgent need for a stronger federal government capable of maintaining order and protecting property rights. Leading figures across the states called for a convention to address these issues and propose amendments to the Articles. George Washington, now retired at Mount Vernon, was deeply concerned about the nation's future, although he had long desired to remain in private life. His sense of duty compelled him to consider participating in the Constitutional Convention. Washington was initially reluctant to attend, wary of becoming embroiled in political affairs once more. However, the urging of influential friends and former comrades, including James Madison and Alexander Hamilton, convinced him that his presence was essential for the success and legitimacy of the convention. The Constitutional Convention convened in Philadelphia in May 1787. Delegates from 12 states, Rhode Island being the sole absentee, gathered in the Pennsylvania State House, now known as Independence Hall. Washington's arrival at the convention was met with great enthusiasm. His reputation for integrity and leadership lent credibility to the proceedings. The delegates unanimously elected him as the president of the convention, a role in which his impartiality and authority would prove invaluable. The convention's debates were intense and often contentious, as delegates grappled with fundamental questions about the structure and powers of the new government. Key issues included the representation of states, the powers of the executive branch, and the balance between federal and state authority. Compromise was essential to reconcile the diverse interests and perspectives represented at the convention. One of the most significant debates centered around the structure of the legislature. Larger states favored the Virginia Plan, which proposed a bicameral legislature with representation based on population. Smaller states, fearing domination by more populous states, supported the New Jersey Plan, which called for equal representation for each state. The deadlock was resolved by the Connecticut Compromise, which established a bicameral legislature with proportional representation in the House of Representatives and equal representation in the Senate. Another critical compromise addressed the contentious issue of slavery. The 3/5 compromise determined that each enslaved person would be counted as 3/5 of a person for purposes of taxation and representation. While this compromise was necessary to gain the support of Southern states, it left a profound moral and political legacy that would haunt the nation for decades. Throughout the convention, Washington's role as president was largely one of moderation and oversight. He did not engage in the detailed debates but provided a steadying influence, ensuring orderly proceedings and fostering an environment conducive to compromise. His presence symbolized the unity and seriousness of purpose that were essential for the convention's success. After months of deliberation, the delegates signed the new Constitution on September 17, 1787. The document established a federal system with a strong central government, incorporating checks and balances among the executive, legislative, and judicial branches. It was a bold and innovative framework designed to address the weaknesses of the Articles of Confederation and provide a stable foundation for the young republic. The next challenge was the ratification of the Constitution by the states. Washington, though reluctant to involve himself in the political fray, lent his support to the cause, understanding the critical importance of a unified national government. His endorsement, along with the persuasive arguments of the Federalist Papers authored by Hamilton, Madison, and John Jay, helped sway public opinion. By June 1788, the requisite 9 states had ratified the Constitution, ensuring its implementation. The new government was inaugurated with Washington unanimously elected as the first president of the United States in 1789. His leadership during the Constitutional Convention and his willingness to serve as the nation's first president were pivotal in shaping the early republic. As the Constitutional Convention drew to a close, Washington reflected on the journey from the turbulent days of the Revolution to the establishment of a new, stronger government. The principles of unity, compromise, and dedication to the common good that had guided the convention would continue to be his guiding lights as he assumed the presidency. Ready to lead the nation through its formative years and ensure the enduring legacy of the American experiment in self-government. Chapter 7. Presidency in the New Nation. George Washington's unanimous election as the first president of the United States was a testament to the immense respect and trust he commanded. On April 30, 1789, he stood on the balcony of Federal Hall in New York City, the temporary capital, and took the oath of office. His inauguration was a solemn and historic event, attended by throngs of citizens who saw in Washington a symbol of the new nation's ideals and hopes. As the first president, Washington faced the monumental task of establishing the executive branch and setting precedents that would guide future administrations. One of his earliest acts was to form the first presidential cabinet, a group of advisors that included Thomas Jefferson as Secretary of State, Alexander Hamilton as Secretary of the Treasury, Henry Knox as Secretary of War, and Edmund Randolph as Attorney General. This diverse team reflected Washington's commitment to balancing differing political views and expertise. Washington's administration quickly turned to the pressing issue of economic policy. Alexander Hamilton, his energetic Treasury Secretary, proposed an ambitious plan to stabilize the nation's finances and foster economic growth. Key components included the federal assumption of state debts, the creation of a national bank, and the imposition of excise taxes. Hamilton's proposal sparked intense debate, particularly from Thomas Jefferson and James Madison, who feared centralization of power and potential overreach by the federal government. One of the most significant domestic challenges Washington faced was the Whiskey Rebellion of 1794. Farmers in western Pennsylvania, angered by the excise tax on distilled spirits, rose in protest, resorting to violence and intimidation against tax collectors. Washington, viewing the rebellion as a direct challenge to federal authority, responded decisively. He personally led a militia force of 13,000 men to suppress the uprising, demonstrating the government's ability and willingness to enforce its laws. The swift resolution of the rebellion reinforced the strength of the new government and established the precedent for federal intervention in domestic insurrections. In foreign policy, Washington navigated a delicate and volatile international landscape. The French Revolution, which began in 1789, sharply divided American public opinion. While many Americans supported the revolutionary cause, the escalating violence and the subsequent European wars posed significant diplomatic challenges. Washington, advised by Hamilton, adopted a policy of neutrality, believing it essential for the young nation to avoid entanglement in foreign conflicts. The policy of neutrality was further tested by the Jay Treaty of 1795. Negotiated by Chief Justice John Jay, the treaty sought to resolve lingering issues with Britain from the Revolutionary War, including the evacuation of British forts in the Northwest Territory and the settlement of pre-war debts. While the treaty averted war and facilitated trade, it was deeply unpopular among many Americans who felt it conceded too much to Britain. Washington's support for the treaty underscored his commitment to peace and pragmatic diplomacy, even at the cost of personal and political popularity. As his second term drew to a close, Washington made the momentous decision to step down, setting another crucial precedent for the peaceful transfer of power. In his farewell address published in September 1796, Washington reflected on the principles that had guided his presidency. He warned against the dangers of political parties and sectionalism, which he believed could divide the nation. He also emphasized the importance of national unity, fiscal responsibility, and a foreign policy of independence and neutrality. Washington's farewell address left an enduring legacy, shaping American political discourse and guiding future leaders. His leadership during the formative years of the Republic established the executive branch as a stabilizing force, grounded in the principles of constitutional governance and dedicated to the common good. After leaving office, Washington returned to Mount Vernon, where he spent his final years managing his estate and continuing to correspond with friends and political leaders. His retirement was a period of relative tranquility, although he remained engaged with the nation's affairs until his death on December 14, 1799. George Washington's presidency laid the foundation for the United States democratic institutions and governance. His ability to navigate complex challenges, both domestic and foreign, and his unwavering commitment to the nascent nation's principles ensured his legacy as a pivotal figure in American history. Washington's example of leadership, characterized by humility, perseverance, and foresight, continued to inspire generations and solidified his place as the father of his country. Chapter 8. Retirement and Legacy. After serving 2 terms as the first President of the United States, George Washington returned to his beloved Mount Vernon in March 1797. His final years at the plantation were marked by a sense of peace and fulfillment as he devoted himself to the management of his estate and the simple pleasures of rural life. Washington took great pride in Mount Vernon, overseeing its expansion and the cultivation of its lands. He experimented with crop rotation, improved livestock breeds, and innovative farming techniques, remaining ever the diligent and progressive farmer. During this period, Washington also supported the planning and development of the nation's new capital, which would bear his name. The establishment of Washington, D.C. on the banks of the Potomac River was a fitting tribute to his leadership and vision. Although he did not live to see the city's completion, his involvement in its initial planning stages underscored his lasting impact on the young republic. Washington's input on the design and layout of the capital reflected his belief in creating a city that symbolized the ideals of the nation. Washington's health began to decline in late 1799. On December 12, he was caught in a rainstorm while inspecting his property. The following day, he developed a severe sore throat and respiratory difficulties. Despite the efforts of his doctors, Washington's condition worsened. On the night of December 14, 1799, surrounded by his family, Washington passed away at the age of 67. His death was a profound loss for the nation he had helped to create. News of Washington's death spread rapidly, and the nation entered a period of deep mourning. Eulogies and tributes poured in from across the country and around the world, honoring his life and achievements. Congress adjourned for the day, and numerous cities held memorial services. In Philadelphia, the capital at the time, a mock funeral procession was held, attended by thousands of mourners. Washington's funeral at Mount Vernon was a solemn affair, with full military honors befitting a man of his stature. Washington's legacy in American history is immense and multifaceted. As the nation's first president, he established numerous precedents that have endured for over 2 centuries. His decision to step down after 2 terms set a standard for the peaceful transfer of power, a cornerstone of American democracy. His farewell address, with its warnings against political parties and entangling alliances, continues to be studied and referenced by scholars and statesmen. Washington's leadership style, characterized by humility, integrity, and a deep sense of duty, left an enduring influence on the presidency and the nation. He navigated the complexities of the early republic with a steady hand, balancing competing interests and setting a tone of nonpartisan governance. His ability to inspire trust and respect, both domestically and internationally, helped solidify the legitimacy and authority of the new government. Beyond his political and military accomplishments, Washington's commitment to the principles of liberty and self-governance resonated through the ages. He was a symbol of the American ideal, a leader who placed the needs of the nation above personal ambition. His Mount Vernon estate, preserved as a national landmark, remains a place of pilgrimage for those who seek to understand the man behind the myth. Washington's legacy also includes his complex relationship with slavery. As a plantation owner, he benefited from and participated in the institution of slavery. However, his evolving views on the subject, particularly in his later years, reflected a growing awareness of its moral and ethical implications. In his will, Washington took the unprecedented step of freeing his enslaved workers upon his wife's death, a decision that highlighted his capacity for growth and change. The enduring influence of George Washington on the presidency and the nation is a testament to his vision and leadership. His ability to unite a fledgling country, guide it through its earliest challenges, and lay the foundation for a stable and prosperous future, ensured his place as one of the most revered figures in American history. Washington's life and legacy continue to inspire and guide the United States, reminding future generations of the values and principles upon which the nation was founded.
Thank you for listening to this episode. Leave a comment on what other historical stories you would like to listen to, and don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel.